You're in a meeting. Someone makes a cutting remark designed specifically to get under your skin. They know exactly how to word it. They know exactly what buttons to push. Everyone in the room holds their breath, waiting for your reaction. The temperature rises. The moment hangs heavy, and then you just look at them. 1 second of eye contact. That's it. You turn back to your work like they said nothing at all. The insult dissolves into the room like it never existed. Your colleague sits there stunned. They expected anger. They expected defensiveness. They expected you to prove them wrong, but you didn't perform for them. You didn't need to. This isn't about being emotionless or cold. This isn't about suppressing how you feel. It's about something INTJ understand that most people never figure out their entire lives. You cannot be controlled by people who don't understand how your mind actually works. There's a reason why INTJ have this reputation for being icebergs. There's a reason why people call them robotic or say they don't care. Most people misread the situation completely. They think INTJ don't get triggered because they're incapable of feeling. The opposite is true. INTJ process emotions, but they've built a completely different relationship with reaction. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly why INTJ stay calm when everyone around them is losing their minds. I'm going to break down the internal logic that makes them psychologically bulletproof. And at the end, I'll reveal the exact framework that transforms you from someone who gets triggered to someone who simply cannot be baited no matter what. But first, you need to understand how INTJ brains are actually wired differently. Here's what most people get wrong about INTJ calm. They assume it comes from not caring. That's not it. INTJ are actually deeply logical about what deserves their energy and what doesn't. Think about how an INTJ approaches a problem. They gather data. They analyze patterns. They identify what's relevant and what's noise. They ruthlessly discard everything that doesn't matter. Now apply that exact same system to human interaction. When someone tries to provoke an INTJ, the INTJ is already running a background analysis. Why is this person attacking? What do they want from me? What's their actual goal here? Is this attack based on reality or based on their perception of reality? The INTJ realizes something crucial that most people never grasp. Most attacks aren't about you. They're about the other person's internal state. Someone attacks because they feel threatened. Someone provokes because they need validation. Someone insults because they're trying to regain power they feel they've lost. The INTJ sees this with absolute clarity, and something happens. The attack becomes data instead of a personal wound. It becomes information instead of a reason to react. And when you stop treating an attack like it's about your worth, you stop needing to defend your worth. That's the fundamental shift. Other people are still playing checkers, trying to win points in a game of insult and defense. INTJ already figured out they don't have to be playing a game at all. But here's the truth nobody wants to admit. People provoke INTJ for the exact same reason they provoke everyone else. They're hunting for a reaction. The INTJ is a challenging target, though. INTJ don't feed on the bait that works on everyone else. They don't need to be right in the moment. They don't need validation from others. They don't need people to understand them. This is absolutely infuriating to someone who's trying to get a rise out of them. Imagine you're trying to make someone angry by insulting their intelligence, and they just stare at you calmly and say, "That's an observation." Not a defense, not an argument. Just a neutral acknowledgement. You wanted a fight, and what you got was a mirror. Someone throws a barb about your competence, and instead of proving how competent you are, an INTJ just returns to work. The person wanted chaos. They got indifference, and that's more destabilizing than any argument could ever be. Because an INTJ isn't refusing to react because they're suppressing emotions. They're refusing to react because reacting would be illogical. The person attacking them doesn't know them well enough to make accurate judgments. Their opinion is based on incomplete information. Validating that incomplete opinion by getting emotional about it would be backwards logic. So the INTJ simply doesn't. They file the information and move on. And what makes this even more powerful is that the INTJ isn't being cold about it. There's no performance of indifference. There's no dramatization of detachment. It's just pure, unsentimental clarity. They understand the attack. They're just choosing not to reward it with energy. This baffles people. Most of us are taught that if we don't defend ourselves, people think we agree with them. If we don't argue back, people think we're weak. But INTJ realize something that shatters this assumption. What other people think doesn't actually determine your reality. Holding yourself accountable to your own internal standards doesn't require convincing an attacker of your worth. You already know what's true about you. The person attacking doesn't have access to that information. Their judgment is irrelevant. This is why INTJ stay calm. It's not resignation. It's not suppression. It's logic. So why does almost everyone else get triggered while INTJ stay untouched? Because the rest of us are making a fundamental error. We're treating our emotional reaction like it's mandatory. We're treating the impulse to defend ourselves as if we have no choice in the matter. We've been told our whole lives that if someone disrespects you, you must respond. If someone questions your ability, you must prove them wrong. If someone challenges you, you must fight back. We've been taught that silence equals weakness. So the moment we feel that surge, we act. We explain. We argue. We attempt to convince someone who has no interest in being convinced. We perform for an audience that isn't even paying attention. And every time we do this, we're giving our power to someone else. We're letting someone else dictate our emotional state. We're letting someone else decide how we spend our energy. An INTJ never does this. An INTJ sees the impulse to defend themselves and makes a decision about whether that reaction is worth their time. Usually, it's not. So they override it, not by suppressing it through gritted teeth, not by building walls to numb themselves, but by actually deciding it's not worth the energy. The impulse doesn't control them because they've already processed why the impulse is there and decided it doesn't serve them. There's a huge difference. One approach is spending emotional energy on control. The other approach is spending intellectual energy on clarity. INTJ chose clarity, and that's what makes them so hard to bait. Here's the thing that makes someone actually unreactive. It's understanding that reacting is always a choice. Most people don't see it that way. Someone says something rude and they feel anger, and they think the anger is controlling them. They feel embarrassed, and they think the embarrassment is forcing them to respond. But an INTJ recognizes that feeling an emotion and acting on that emotion are two completely separate events. You can feel rage and choose not to rage. You can feel humiliated and choose not to perform humiliation. You can feel hurt and choose not to weaponize that hurt back at someone else. This is the core of INTJ Stoicism. Not the mythology that INTJ don't feel, but the reality that INTJ don't perform feelings on demand. They don't act out emotions for other people's consumption. Someone comes at them aggressively, and instead of matching that aggression, an INTJ responds with questions. Instead of defending themselves, they might ask, "Why do you think that about me?" Instead of arguing their point, they might say, "I hear what you're saying. There's no emotional performance. There's no match of intensity. There's just presence. And in that presence, something interesting happens. The attacker realizes they can't hijack the INTJ's emotional state. They can't make this person dance the way they were designed to dance. And that's when they either escalate or they disengage. Most people disengage. Because attacking someone who won't dance to your rhythm feels pointless. But here's what's fascinating. Even when someone does escalate, the INTJ stays the same. They've already decided what their response will be, and they stick to it. This drives aggressive people absolutely insane. Because they're used to people matching their energy. They're used to escalation begetting escalation. But with an INTJ, you can go higher and higher, and the INTJ just stays still. That stillness is terrifying to someone who needs to win. The INTJ's actual technique is so simple that most people dismiss it when they hear it. Because simplicity doesn't feel powerful. We expect real strength to be complex. We expect real methods to be elaborate. But the most effective approach is almost always the most minimal one. Here's how an INTJ actually operates when someone tries to trigger them. They refuse to overcomplicate their response. When someone attacks, they don't give lengthy explanations. When someone provokes, they don't mount a comprehensive defense. They keep their answer so short that there's nothing for the attacker to grab onto. Why would you do that? I had my reasons. Don't you care what people think? Not particularly. That's not going to work, and you know it. Maybe. What's wrong with you? I'm not sure that's a productive question. You see what's happening? The INTJ is refusing to be the source of drama. They're refusing to provide the detailed narrative that fuels the fire. Most of us write entire novels in response to a single sentence. We tell the full story of why we did what we did. We explain our motivations. We justify our position. We offer evidence. And while we're doing all that, we're handing the attacker everything they need to keep attacking. The INTJ does the opposite. They give the bare minimum, not coldly, not to punish, but because any more than the bare minimum is feeding the conflict, and the INTJ has already decided that's not worth their time. This is the real power move, not volume of explanation, not intensity of defense, just perfect economy of response. Say what's necessary, say nothing more, be truthful. Don't perform emotion, and then wait for the other person to adjust to the fact that their bait isn't working. What makes this approach unbreakable is that it removes every tool someone typically uses to provoke. You can't argue with someone who won't argue back. You can't defend against someone who isn't attacking you. You can't win against someone who refused to play the game. When you actually adopt this INTJ framework, something profound shifts in your life. Situations that used to dominate your day suddenly become invisible to you. That coworker who used to make your blood boil with a single comment? They're just background noise now. That family member who knew exactly which buttons to push? They're still pushing. Nothing's happening. You're not reacting because you understand something they don't. Their opinion of you is none of your business. Their need for validation isn't your responsibility. Their inability to regulate their own emotions isn't a problem you have to solve. This is what true equanimity looks like. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of genuine choice over what affects you. You choose which battles matter. You choose which relationships warrant your energy. You choose whether someone's attack is actually relevant to your life. And here's the twist. When you become someone who cannot be baited, you become someone who cannot be controlled. Because control requires emotional leverage. Control requires the ability to predict what will set someone off. Control requires finding the wound that will make someone react. But if you refuse to react to provocation, there's nothing to control. You've become immune. And this immunity is the ultimate power move in human dynamics. Because while everyone else is exhausted from defending themselves, from explaining themselves, from trying to prove their worth, you're just building your life. You're focused on what actually matters. You're investing your energy in things that serve you. You're moving toward your goals instead of being dragged backward by people trying to destabilize you. That's the unfair advantage. The person who can't be triggered has all the energy. The person who won't react has all the clarity. The person who refuses to play has already won before the game even started. So what's the actual mechanism that makes this possible? How do you take everything you understand intellectually and actually live it when your emotions are screaming? Here's the core principle that INTJ internalize. Feeling an impulse to react is not the same as having to react. You can acknowledge the impulse without following it. You can feel the anger without expressing the anger. You can be hurt by something without making that hurt someone else's emergency. This is where most people get stuck. They assume that feeling something means they have to do something about it. But you've seen this already if you've ever been around INTJ. Someone makes a jab at them, and you can see they heard it. There's a brief moment where the recognition registers. And then they just move on. No explosion, no defense. Just acknowledgement and return to what matters. That's the skill. Separating the feeling from the action. Building the ability to sit with an emotion without being controlled by it. Most of us never practice this. So when we feel something, we're at its mercy. We feel anger, so we explode. We feel shame, so we explain. We feel attacked, so we defend. It's automatic, but it doesn't have to be. An INTJ practices this until it becomes automatic in the other direction. They feel anger and automatically ask themselves whether reacting serves them. They feel shame and automatically recognize whether the shame is accurate. They feel attacked and automatically evaluate whether the attack is based on anything real. And in asking themselves those questions, they give their mind time to override the automatic impulse. That gap is everything. In that gap between stimulus and response is your freedom, and INTJ live in that gap. They're not suppressing emotion. They're just refusing to be puppeteered by it. The most interesting thing that happens when you truly master this approach is that people actually stop trying to trigger you. Not because you became mean or distant, but because the game stops being rewarding for them. They came for a reaction, and they got a wall of calm. They came for drama, and they got straightforward responses. They came for someone to prove them right about being reactive, and they got someone who proved them wrong by not reacting at all. After a few attempts, they realize you're not the toy they thought you were. So they move on. They find someone else who will give them the engagement they're seeking. And you find yourself in a world that suddenly feels quieter. Not because you've isolated yourself, but because you've stopped being available for other people's chaos. You're still engaged. You're still connected. But you're connected on your terms. You're engaged with what matters to you, not hijacked by what matters to someone else. This is the freedom that INTJs experience. Not the freedom from conflict, which doesn't exist, but the freedom to choose whether they participate in conflict. The freedom to stay focused on what they're building while everyone else is still caught in cycles of reaction. The freedom to be triggered and then just not care that they were triggered. Because understanding why someone attacked you removes your need to react to the attack. Knowledge is insulation. Clarity is armor, and refusal to participate is the ultimate move. Here's what changes when you become psychologically bulletproof. You realize that your peace isn't actually dependent on other people behaving the way you want them to behave. They're going to say cutting things. They're going to make passive-aggressive comments. They're going to push buttons. That's not your problem to solve. Your only problem is deciding what you'll do when they do it. And once you realize you have that choice, everything shifts. The power stops being theirs. The power becomes yours. When you stop trying to win arguments with people determined to misunderstand you, you free up enormous amounts of energy. When you stop trying to convince attackers of your worth, you stop draining yourself. When you stop reacting to provocation, you stop giving people access to your inner state. This is what INTJ calm actually is. It's not indifference, it's strategic clarity. It's the refusal to perform emotions on demand. It's the understanding that your peace is more valuable than proving a point. It's the recognition that staying calm isn't weakness. It's the ultimate strength. Most people will spend their entire lives not getting this. They'll keep reacting. They'll keep defending. They'll keep explaining themselves to people who have no intention of listening. But you can choose differently. You can build the habit of pause. You can practice the skill of separating emotion from action. You can decide that your peace is not negotiable. You can become someone who cannot be triggered because you've decided that nothing external controls your internal state. You can think like an INTJ and act like someone who has genuinely mastered the ability to stay calm no matter who's trying to get under your skin. The calm doesn't come from not caring. It comes from caring so much about your own direction that other people's provocations become irrelevant. And that's the real power move. Not fighting better, not winning more arguments, but refusing to be drawn into battles that were never yours to fight. Next time someone tries to trigger you, next time you feel that impulse to defend or explain or prove yourself, remember you don't owe anyone a reaction. You don't owe anyone your emotional energy. You don't owe anyone access to your inner world. Choose your battles. Choose your energy. Choose your calm. And if this shifts something in you, hit subscribe. Make steady logic your default. The person who won't be triggered becomes the person who cannot be controlled. Thanks for watching.